Hey, it's Sam, and I'm doing the May 2020 forecast predictions, and we're going to be talking about the Venus retrograde. We're going to be talking about other shifts. We're going to be talking about the other retrogrades, which include Saturn and Jupiter retrograde. So a lot of retrogrades in May 2020, which is going to, again, show a quality of the retrograde, which means to revisit, to reflect, to redo, so to speak. Now, if you want to get updates, like, subscribe, and get notified, here you can see it up there. And you can be notified when I do other videos. I try to do 3-4 videos a week, updates, and other things like that. And I plan on doing quite a few here soon, especially with all these retrogrades coming up. A lot to talk about, and I'm going to touch on some of it today, of course, and what those things mean. So, as you can see also here down at the bottom of the screen, I have a card that says 14 days of forecast, 50 cents full and new moon updates for your sign, and 8 hours of classes. For those of you who don't know, I do have it's called the Astrology Training Lab, where only 50 cents, you can get 14 days of forecast, of free forecast. Well, they're not free, they're for 50 cents. If you want to keep going after that, you just allow the membership to keep going. It's then $39.95 a month. But you get these daily forecasts based on the classical Indian Panchanga, which has to do with nakshatra, tithi, other things. And again, you also get 8 hours of classes, how to read your chart, this excellent template, chart reading template that you get. You also get Foundations of Astrology, $120 value. This is like 4 hours of classes that I taught, 4.5 hours at a conference several years ago. And then you also get Quantum Vedic Astrology, which is a 3-hour lecture that I taught, which people also really loved, which brings together astrology, cosmology, neuroscience in the brain, and quantum physics. Pretty powerful stuff. So again, it's only 50 cents if you want to try it, and you get 14 days of forecasts. And then if you want to keep going, you can do that. But so I just thought I would say that and say it up front, because I forget to say these things once I get going. So people often say, what about this? What about that? And I forget to mention it. So this is the chart for May 1st. That's about to start in a few days. One second. And so we see that the month starts with the sun exalted in Aries with Mercury. So we have exalted sun here, which brings a lot of desire and passion to be strong individual and strong individually right now. For the first couple weeks, we have this need and desire for personal strength, to get clear, to be empowered in our individuality. And the sun in Aries also, what it can overdo the fiery individuality if we're not careful. And, it's often at the expense of compromising with others and things like that. So it definitely can have a detrimental effect at times in your relationships, so to speak, if you're not careful. But it's also good for that healthy individuality and clarity. So at least for the first couple weeks, we'll see that. And then Venus is also in Taurus. Now, this is good for really, first of all, connecting with your own values, your own value system. First, identifying that and feeling good and comfortable with what and who you surround yourself with, who affirms your values, who makes you feel valued. But that's an extension of your own self-worth and your own value equation. And, when we don't understand our own value, or we don't value ourselves, or wherever we are on the spectrum, we get into situations where others don't value us, and we try to get them to value us. And then we get into situations with other people, whether romantic relationships or friendships or whatever, where we feel devalued. We also devalue others. It's not one-sided, no matter what you might think. It starts with your not feeling valuable. Then maybe others devalue you or not. Maybe you just project devaluing as well. Again, this whole kind of thing, it's very tricky. We can have a sensitivity to feeling unappreciated and then lash out, and by extension, not appreciate the other person. So working through this, it's very confusing. So relationships can often be very confusing, but with Venus and Taurus, it's really a time to settle into our own sense of value, our own valuing, and valuing others as well. One of the great things about a powerful Venus also is we find great appreciation, especially great appreciation for those who we've tried to be involved with. And ultimately we need to reach that point in our interactions with others, whether, again, any kind of friendships, romantic relationships, whatever. People have tried to work it out with us, and at least for myself, I always get to that point of ultimately I appreciate that they tried, I tried, but things don't last forever. And if you have a healthy sense of, self-esteem or self-respect or whatever, you don't wind up, bitter or all this kind of thing. Now, again, there are extreme situations for sure, but ultimately, especially in the relationships and the engagements that we've been in of our own volition for years, we're pretty much complicit in whatever has happened. So I'm talking about this a lot because Venus has been in Taurus for about a month, since the end of March, and it's going to be there until August. So I'm going to do a longer video on Venus and the retrograde cycle, but this is a big cycle that we're going through between now and early August. It also coincides with a retrograde cycle that started 8 years ago, the same one, because Venus retrograde cycles are 8-year cycles. And so again, I'm going to do a longer video on that because it's a very good time now to really look at the last 8 years even. And again, it's not just romantic relationships. That's too simple. It's respect and value and values. For example, what happened with me 8 years ago is the biggest thing that happened is my mother died. Literally like the day after Mother's Day. The day after Mother's Day, she had a massive heart attack and never regained consciousness. And then she died 2 days later. And again, that set in motion a lot of things that I had to work through, especially for a couple years. And then the last few years, really making peace with the explanations and justifications and all the stuff that happened around all that. I'll do a longer video on the Venus, but I'm just kind of letting you know some of these things that are going to be happening, not just in May, but through May and June and whatnot, as these larger themes will be coming up and cycles that maybe started even 8 years ago, for example, and deeper breakthroughs. So in addition, we still have Rahu, Ketu in Gemini and Sagittarius, which is about getting the truth, learning the truth, seeing the truth and the information, getting the correct information and learning based on the messages that are coming to us and seeing them truthfully, not just through our own kind of spin. We live in the age of spin and propaganda, and also we may say paranoia. It's not just the age of information, it's the age of disinformation. The age of misinformation. So especially since the middle of last year, since March of last year, since the end of March last year, we've been really awakening to something deeper as we see the truth of things. And Rahu going through Gemini has really been showing us and giving us a lot of information and truthful information so we can see. We also have a big stellium here of Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, at least at the beginning of May in Capricorn. As you see, it doesn't take long for Mars to move. Mars is going to leave. If I step this is set to 1 day. I move the chart forward 1 day, and you see Mars by May 4th, Mars has moved into Aquarius. So by May 4th, Mars moves into Aquarius, out of Capricorn, and Saturn and Jupiter remain in Capricorn, which has really been showing us sort of hunker down, social distancing, this whole riding out coronavirus, trying to survive that, trying to, not knuckle under to our fears and getting through it and staying, hopefully becoming stronger internally, becoming more compassionate with others, and, working through our own fears and our own need to try to control everything, and also realizing that we're not in control, that there are big things beyond our control that are happening. By the way, I should also mention, I'll go back here with the Venus and Taurus. In many ways, the bigger lesson beyond the personal, but, again, this Venus retrograde until early August, it's not just about the personal. Of course, much of our sense of beauty and value and how we want to be respected and nurtured, and again, where we find our beauty and happiness comes through other individuals and other people. We put so much intent, so much of our attention on that. But with Venus going through Taurus, it's a much more universalized approach and relationship that we have now to beauty itself and to nature and to the harmony of the earth and nature that we're out of balance with, that we're not in alignment with, that we've disrupted as human beings. So a big part of the cycle that we've seen and that we've been seeing since we've had this corona has been this reckoning with how easily and beautifully the earth regenerates itself. The pollution down, the animals returning to places where humans have just been encroaching and crowding them out, and seeing this beauty of the world and hopefully finding some deeper respect for life beyond just human beings, as we're entitled to just wreak havoc on nature and on the earth. This Venus through Taurus has really been showing us that, if we've been paying attention as well. I talk about that because, a big part of the surviving the coronavirus and since we've been locked in our home, which is all this Capricorn energy, Saturn and Capricorn with Jupiter and Mars, like lockdown, all the Capricorn energy. And it's like we're looking out the window at nature, having a great old time without us, which is that Venus in Taurus, looking out the window, again, feeling stuck inside and trapped inside and punished is like the Capricorn, all that Capricorn energy. But then the Venus energy is like, it's a beautiful day out, and every other creature on earth is enjoying life, having a great time while we're stuck inside. Now, again, we can feel like we can be childish about it and just feel like we're being punished. And now let's get back to our previous ways as fast as possible. Let's get back to consuming all that meat and driving and flying all over the world and all that. Let's get back on it. Let's get back to it as soon as possible. But we're starting to realize that's not going to happen anytime soon, at least to the degree that it was before, if ever at that degree. It might not ever get back to that degree. In fact, it probably won't, at least to the excessive nature that it was before. We're starting to see this, and this is starting to become more of a reality. And we're also getting the awareness that that's for the better. It's for the better, that we need to develop a more holistic relationship with the earth. So this is, and I'm talking about this again because this is where we've been with all these planets in Capricorn and Taurus, right? And we start out May, of course, with those same planets. And these are earth signs, all this earth wisdom. The ruler of Capricorn, Saturn, is there. Whenever the rulers are there, we get the wisdom, right? And the ruler of the ruler of Taurus, Venus, is there, giving us that appreciation of beauty and nature. And values and valuing ourselves and valuing others. Others doesn't just mean other human beings. Again, our relationship with other human beings is often very, it has a duality. No matter who we are, there's a narcissistic tendency to it. There's a, I'll do it for you if you do it for me. Oh, you didn't value me, so now I get to attack you. Even if what you did, you didn't do. Even if it's just that I think you did it. Now I get to attack you and accuse you. And now you have to defend yourself. Again, so our appreciation with other people, especially the more intimate it is, the more triggers that are there. Frankly, the less Venus we can tend to be, especially at times. We have to look at those situations as a real sort of crucible, right? And really examine, and hopefully we'll be examining these things now from both sides. That's the real benefit. But I like to set human interactions aside when I talk about Venus as well, because, ultimately Venus is exalted in Pisces, where we're happy for no reason. And we can see the bigger picture, which is frankly beyond our desires and beyond our triggering and beyond what we expect. Because ultimately everything revolves around ourselves. We're there, let's say if it's in a relationship, because we feel appreciated and because of how we feel, how the other person makes us feel. And so, but with nature and with animals and with other things that are higher, again, which is this Venus exalted in Pisces, which is beyond just our own personal desires. Our desires become universal. It's exalted in Pisces, where there's happiness for no reason, where we see things from a very high level. But anytime Venus is in its own sign, again, like in Taurus especially is connected to nature. And Libra, the other sign ruled by Venus, is actually connected to relationship. But Venus and Taurus really shows our connection to the beauty of nature right now. So we can expect this to continue. And it's an amazing time for us to really get the message. And we're seeing it all around us now, especially in news stories about, again, things like our, quote, food supply, which is actually our meat supply, which is actually our slaughtered animal supply. Let's not get into euphemisms. Let's see it clearly for what it is. And look at what that whole thing is. Venus is showing us a more humane way, and it's going to continue in that sense. And we're also seeing a greater appreciation for the social distancing and whatnot, even though governors and leaders might be saying, okay, go back out into culture now, go back and get your hair cut, go bowling, go to casinos, go to restaurants. People don't want to do it. And it's not just because of fear for their own skin, saving their own skin, but it's also because they like their barber or their hairdresser or the person that works in the restaurant. They don't want to get them sick. They don't want us all getting sick. I know people that are in the beauty industry, haircutting industry, and they're like, my clients, they care about me. They don't want me out there yet. Again, this is very much Taurus and Venus, respect for each other, and not just for money and commerce and what we can get out of it. So again, we're starting the month there. But again, then we see Mars moves in early May. Mars goes into Aquarius. Now, again, Mars in Aquarius is more about social restlessness and wanting to get out into society more. Maybe some cultural clashes. I don't think it's going to be cultural clashes around politics and all that stuff. I don't think it's going to be that kind of thing. I think it's going to be more about, restlessness and frustration, frankly, with the entities and with the governments and with the institutions themselves. I think people are going to feel somewhat united around our collective frustration with the bureaucracies themselves, literally like the governors or the president or whatnot. Now, again, you're going to have people maybe on both sides, but what I'm saying is I don't think they're going to have, like, let's say, for example, some people have said, Republicans and Democrats, like Trump supporters, people on the right or others on the left. You're not going to have this cultural clash over this stuff. Again, I think this COVID, this lockdown is showing the people have the power. And collectively, we have much more in common than the things that divide us. Now, we need to keep our mind vigilant to these things. We need to keep our mind vigilant to these things. And I've never really thought that people would turn on each other around these imagined these political differences are real, but ultimately I don't think anybody wants Republicans dead more than Democrats or whatever we might say. It's not going to be that kind of thing. It's going to be the people restless and rebelling against having to stay home and the oppressive forces to them who might be saying stay home. Now, maybe you'll have people that are wanting others to stay home and those who want to get out. Maybe there'll be that sort of tension you might see. But I don't predict that kind of thing. I see it more as Mars in Aquarius is having us want to get out and be social again. And we're going to see, for example, around the end of May. Now, as I move this forward, we've had these planets go retrograde, which I'm going to back up on. But you see here, this is May 24th, 25th, 26th. Mars is aspecting the sun here in Taurus. We might see around the end of May some of this restlessness maybe spill over a little bit more, where people are starting to get really frustrated about about things. Okay, now it's time for us to get back on it, and we have to open up the world, and we'll deal with casualties and things like that, but we have to start trying to return to life as normal. Now, again, I'm not making a judgment on this, like right or wrong or what we should be doing. I said from the beginning we were going to have an intense month of April, and then by early May we're going to start getting out again, but that we're going to be probably dealing with this back and forth at least through June and perhaps longer. And I say through June because that's when Jupiter goes back into Sagittarius. But let me just back up again. So again, at the end of May, we're going to start to see some, maybe more frustration coming out, maybe even more than earlier. It'll, perhaps start to really mount. Now, I want to go back and look at, 1 second. By the way, there is that card on the screen that talks about this astrology training lab. And again, I want people to know that you can get daily forecasts based on the Panchanga, based on the ruler of the day, the nakshatra, because the moon is moving into different nakshatras every day, based on the Tithi or the lunar phase, like the full moon and new moons are lunar phases, based on the aspects of the planets to each other and whatnot. You could try it for only 50 cents for 14 days. Daily forecast, and you also get all of these, 8 hours of classes, chart reading template, foundations of Vedic astrology. All of these videos are great. Spirit takes form. How does astrology actually work? Why are the planets seen as gods? How are you and everything in creation a microcosm of divine genius? All these questions are answered. Then I assess how planets express their feeling nature through the signs, how the signs fall at certain places and produce different things in our life. And then synthesizing those important factors, the chart reading and streamlining the prioritizing and chart analysis, case study of Angelina Jolie, her personality profile and whatnot. My friend Jeffrey Armstrong said that you can really learn the vocabulary and how to talk about things from me. This is when I met Jeffrey Armstrong, who's a good friend. So again, only 50 cents. You get all these classes, and it's really something that, literally thousands of people have done over the years. So those who don't know, you can check that out. So if we go back, we can see this when these retrogrades start. Let me go back here. So the first retrograde is Saturn. It's actually, what happens is the planets stationary. They first station and then they go retrograde. So even right now, Saturn is very close to being stationary. You can see he's barely moving at all. So when he completely stops, it begins to say retrograde, but he's been stopped at 7 degrees 49 minutes, and then he goes 7:48. He's been stationary at the same place for a month and a half or so by the time he actually goes retrograde. So the actual date is May 10th, where it would be considered retrograde because the motion is completely stationary. So Saturn retrograde, he's retrograde close to half the time, is going to show us reflecting on those things we've been committed to, our long-term commitments. This includes things like, our work, where we live, our relationships, those things where we've invested a lot of our commitments. And, again, Saturn is in Capricorn now. So hopefully we're honest with ourselves. We're realistic. Again, if we're not, we're just going to bring more suffering. But it's a time to be honest and realistic about, again, what we've done. One of the biggest problems with a difficult Saturn is we often don't want to be responsible for ourselves. We want to say, oh, it wasn't me. It was this person. Again, for example, the debilitation sign is Aries, which is like me. I'm the one who's important. And so, again, like when something goes bad or the pain in life, it's like, it was done to me. It's done to me. It actually has a lot of potential like victim mentality in it. And whatnot. By the way, I'm not saying if somebody has their Saturn there. I'm just saying as an archetype. One of the things to know about exaltation and debilitation points, just like I just said with Venus, is it's an archetype. And one of the most important archetypes. No matter where Saturn is in your natal chart, you can understand the highest and lowest functioning of Saturn just by examining the exaltation and debilitation points. We can understand the highest function of Saturn by examining the sign where it's exalted, which is Libra. The best we get out of Saturn is being gracious, is waiting, is hesitating, is asking the other person before we accuse them, or whatever it might be on a personal level. I say because it's Libra. Shows that the biggest problems we get into with Saturn has to do with things that are related to Aries, which is impulsive, attacking. Again, the negative qualities of Aries, which is, I'm right, I'm the one that's important. How dare you? And tantrums and explosions. That hurts the Saturn part of us more than anything else, which means that quality of life undermines our plans and our commitments and those who want to be committed to us or that we're committed to in our work and this and that. That gets undermined the most, all of our plans and where we thought we were going, by the impulsive nature of Aries. Again, I'm not saying if it's in your chart. People have people have Saturn in Aries and they don't act like that because of other things or whatever. It's an archetype. But we can understand a lot about these placements. This is why those exaltation signs are given. And again, because Saturn is now in Capricorn, it's really bringing the consequences. So all of us have really been having to reckon with consequences since Saturn went into Capricorn at the end of January. Since the end of January, because, Saturn hasn't been in his own sign for almost 30 years. Since the end of January, Saturn has been in Capricorn. And the truth of our commitments, of our actions, are really sitting on us now. And if we choose to see it, again, we're going to see our own part in it more than the others, especially like other people, or how we're a victim of circumstance from our childhood, and all of the stuff that we can get into. Saturn in Capricorn is giving us this for the next few years, so we better get used to it. And we can cheat the master of time for so long and feel good vindicating ourselves and fighting or whatever it is that we might want to do, blaming. Again, this is one of the worst qualities of Saturn, is not owning things and blaming, if not others, but circumstances. And of course, that winds up being others, our parents, our this, our that, society. It's not like none of that happened. It happened. But it's our karma to understand that, especially things that happened so long ago, the situations we're involved in now, or that we've been involved in since we've been an adult, that's been our response. And that's only our responsibility. No one can force us to do any of that, for the most part. So Saturn's about getting real now. His retrograde in Capricorn is definitely about getting real with all that, and reflecting on this for the next few months. And again, especially things like lack of forgiveness. Again, this is why the exaltation point of Saturn is Libra. Libra is forgiving. It's the highest quality, really, of Venus. And there's forgiveness, right? We hang on to resentment at our own peril. My guru Amma says that, being angry or hanging on to resentments and anger is like stabbing someone with a knife that has a blade on both ends. It's like you might stab the person, but you also get cut, because it's like stabbing someone with a double-edged sword or a double-edged knife, where both ends are a blade. So again, resentments and blaming, we need to try to forgive for our own benefit as much as the other person. You're not doing the other person a favor by forgiving them. You're giving yourself a favor more than anything, because the other person might not even be angry if it's some kind of thing going on. So we hang on to resentments at our own peril. Big theme for the next several months as Saturn is retrograde. And he's retrograde for like 4.5 months into September. So it's a long cycle. And then Jupiter, I think Venus is the next one. Yeah, then Venus turns retrograde next. So again, this is again along the same lines of the resentments and of it's really a time for us to introspect and be real about, literally, frankly, how we treat others, not just how they treat us. Again, and it's not just others, but a lot of our Venus energy comes through others, and really comes through other people, and not just be about how we were treated, but how we respond when we're not treated well. For example, how do we treat the other person when we feel we're not treated well? Whether we are or not, again, and sometimes it's hard to know. Is this just me expecting that I was being mistreated, or was I really being mistreated? Was this just something that I don't like? And how did I respond as a result? And how much disrespect do I bring on myself because of how I disrespect others when I feel disrespect, or whatever it is? It's circular. None of these planetary energies are simple. They're all a conversation with the gods. We're in communion with the gods. We're in communion with these higher cosmic forces. How we're treated is a reflection of how we treat. We all know this at some point. And again, particularly for things we've been doing a long time, and we were always getting something out of it the entire time, and so healing ourselves, all of this is about healing ourself first. But the first part of healing something within ourselves is owning it. You don't heal anything that you disown. You don't heal anything that you blame on others. There's just no healing in that. I don't care what anyone says. There's not. And no one would say that. No one would say this. And I'm just bringing this out because these are the negative, confusing qualities of both Saturn and Venus. This is why I'm talking about things like blaming and shaming. Again, these are things that we often can do in relationships and that sets them off. Like, you did something, and we try to blame or shame, let's say, someone. And then they don't want to interact with us because they don't want to be blamed or shamed, let's say, or we accept blame and shame because it's a pattern that we haven't outgrown, or we think we're being blamed and shamed when maybe we're not. For example, maybe the person is just pointing something out and we take it like, oh, you're blaming me or shaming me, because that's what we're used to. Again, all of these things we have to try to work through. All of it is the ego. Underneath it all, that's what all of it is about. We're all here to evolve and to consciously develop beyond all of this attachment. It's so serious. Everything here is so serious. None of it's serious. None of it is that serious. And particularly in much of our relationships and the games and the stuff we're going back and forth in. And yet we have the highest attachments often in our interpersonal relationships, and not just romantic, but all friendships and with parents and with friends and whatever it is. That's where we take things the most seriously. And in many ways, it's the least serious part, I would say. And I mean least serious, not that it's actually not serious, but it's where we need to be the least serious. It's where we need to be the most friendly and light and spacious, and we need to be the most tolerant and light in those things, and we're the most attached. And it's where we need to be the most relaxed. So this retrograde Saturn and this retrograde Venus really bringing a lot of, again, not just around relationships, but around, because so much of our life revolves around these things, it brings that up. But again, as I've talked about earlier, it's also reflecting on our deeper relationships, as I said, like with nature and with our past. Again, one of the big things about retrograde is it takes us into our past, takes us into, again, not just our childhood or something, but literally, like I just mentioned with this Venus retrograde here, 8 years, we're having the ending of a cycle. For me, it's very clear because, as I said, my mom died right on the Venus retrograde 8 years ago. And of course, that took me into a past. This is now taking me also into a past of seeing how I've dealt with Venus and other people, through work, relationships, and all kinds of things, how much has changed in those 8 years. Things I've put up with or walked away from, or just shifts that I've gone through with that Venus retrograde. Some have to do with relationships with individuals, others don't. Others have to do with just my relationship with respect and with beauty and with happiness and with, in fact, frankly, not, explaining or trying to convince people that might want to have me, you did this, tell me, like, for example, not reacting to being shamed or someone trying to shame me or blame me, changing my relationship with that whole equation, for example. Because this was my pattern, frankly, growing up with all of that. But like many of us, I'm not different. But the reason I'm seeing that too, and is we all, these are really familiar buttons that we all have. And again, this is one of the reasons why I also say we tend to be so attached to this part of life, and we need to be more relaxed. Because as much as we think we're the most unique person that ever happened, and I'm the only one who ever had anything happen to me, we've all had the same things happen. We've all felt all of it. We've all felt blamed. We've all felt shamed. We've all felt accused. We've all felt like we need to justify ourselves for something. We all have to go through this, being disrespected, so then disrespecting others. These are all universal principles. And they're related to the planets, by the way. This is why we learn astrology. And when we learn astrology, we start to learn these things in a more universal way, not in such a personal way. Like, oh, I'm the only one that's ever had this happen. No, we all have. And so these universal principles really come out when, especially when planets line up in their own signs and have these transits that don't happen all the time. Like Venus in its own sign for 4 months, like as it happened pretty much back in 2012, which is the last time that it went through there. And so by that time, in fact, Venus turns retrograde on the 13th, and then Jupiter turns retrograde the very next day on the 14th. Now Venus and Jupiter are retrograde. Jupiter is also debilitated, which tends to modify the debilitation. So Jupiter going retrograde, when Jupiter's retrograde, we really evaluate our relationship to teachers and gurus and things like that. We introspect about our beliefs, what we believe, what inspires us. Now, when Jupiter is debilitated, like he's been in Capricorn, now again, he's been joined as ruler. So you always have to have the Nichabanga. So Jupiter's been debilitated, but the ruler is there. So even though Jupiter is feeling like he's lacking some hope, Jupiter's lacking hope in Capricorn. Saturn is there saying, okay, well, maybe you're lacking hope, but here's the practical methods to take in order to use the hope that you do have towards something useful. And this is how Nichabanga works. Whatever the Nichabanga is, it tends to salvage and elevate the difficulty of the debilitation. So Jupiter lacking hope isn't so good, especially if Saturn is really far away or something. But with Saturn there, he says, okay, well, maybe you're lacking hope, but here's the hope you do have, and here's the great lessons you have learned. Now, some of those lessons and teachings haven't felt so good, but look at all the benefit that you've gotten from it and how much, how practical you are about the things you do believe, right? So Saturn going retrograde is going to bring, can really bring a greater appreciation for our teachings, for our teachers, because the retrograde again brings a lot of introspection and a lot of reflection on our habits and routines and things like that, especially in Capricorn. So the Jupiter retrograde is excellent for reflecting on what inspires you and putting it into practical, into a practical form, into a practical structure. And so again, this Venus retrograde and Saturn retrograde both are, and Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter retrograde are the real prominent features of May. Of course, it comes through the middle of May. And then by the end of May, we have all the other planets are in the same place. Or no, I'm sorry. Mercury also, I forgot to say here. Let me talk about the transit of the sun and Mercury. So Mercury flies through Aries. So by early May, by May 9th, look at how fast Mercury's moving. On May 8th, Mercury's 2936. By May 8th, he's 2936. By May 9th, he's moved 2 degrees. So Mercury is very combust at the first part of May. So when Mercury is combust, he's moving very fast. Now he's combust in Aries, which shows a lot of mental activity in this first part of May. Again, we have to be careful not to get too spun out on all of our ideas. Look at how fast Mercury's moving. 1638 on the 2nd, 1847. More than 2 degrees a day, Mercury is moving. You see, he flies through the sign. 2056, then 2306. Again, more than 2 degrees a day, Mercury is moving at the beginning of May, and it's in Aries. It's really quite possible to feel, and this is full-on combustion. It's not retrograding combust. It's on the other side of the sun, moving really fast. So again, you want to be careful at the beginning of May, especially until May 9th, to avoid arguing and arguments. People can be very triggered and ready to fight and argue. Again, Mercury in Aries is already a bit argumentative. They're ready to, again, I say they, when people have this or just in general, it's what it sounds like. It's Aries, which is a lot of opinions and ready to argue over them. Mercury is our speech, and it's very black and white. You said this, now you said that. Look, you did this, you did that. Look, and it's ready to argue in general, let alone when it's this combust. So beginning of May until like May 9th, be careful getting sucked into arguments and fights and battles. People are going to want to argue and fight and battle, including you. So be careful of that. And again, he's also moving fast as he goes through Taurus, but Taurus is a much more settled sign. And so when Mercury enters, Mercury will enter Taurus. He goes through Taurus really fast as well. So Mercury's in Taurus from May 9th until May 24th. So May 9th through May 24th, Mercury's in Taurus. He's joined Venus there and the sun for part of it. So again, May 9th through May 24th, Mercury in Taurus, much more accommodating language. It could definitely be a time, May 9th through May 24th, where you can, maybe compromise and strike agreements with people that maybe you're in fights with or arguments with or things like that, particularly once Venus goes retrograde. Again, Saturn, Jupiter go retrograde. Hopefully people are going to be reflecting, being real, getting real about things, getting real about the long-term plans they've had, maybe that haven't been working out the way they had wanted, or whatever it is that I already mentioned. And so from May 9th through May 24th, Mercury going through Taurus, definitely a good time to, find common ground again and actually communicate and soothe wounds with other people. It might be hard before May 9th. And by the way, after May 24th, Mercury is in Gemini, which again is also good for communication. So the end of May is quite good because we're going to have Mercury in Gemini in his own sign. And is he going to go retrograde there? Yeah. Okay, so Mercury's going to be in Gemini for quite a while. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. But that's really good. Mercury will be in Gemini for a couple months. Probably, for May 24th until probably early August. Probably early August, May, June, July. Yeah. So, and then the sun is going to also join Venus in Taurus. It'll be like May 15th or something. We got 14th. So May 14th, the sun joins Venus in Taurus. Now, again, we're bringing a lot of healing Taurus energy in the middle of May, from the middle of May till the end. Again, I'm focusing a lot of this on our personal interactions. Again, not just with people, but again, whatever house this might fall from in your chart, this is also very important because, like, if you're Leo, this is your 10th house. So you'd be experiencing a lot of this healing, personal interactions around your work, whatever. If you're Aquarius, it's your 4th house. Again, of course, a lot of this healing in your home life. Scorpio, 7th house. Again, just a lot of healing around your relationships, hopefully, and a lot of, reckoning with, partners and things like that. And, of course, your Taurus, it's your 1st house, so it's your identity and things of that nature. By the way, again, I talk about these things when I talk about the sun and moon cycles. And so I'll be talking about that for those who get the Astrology Training Lab, this is all part of that. But, you know, a lot of this transit of the sun then through Taurus from May 14th until like June 15th, whatever the exact date is when it goes into Gemini, is trying to bring more of this stability, structure, peace. You know, underneath it all, the thing we all want is to be respected, to feel peaceful, to feel happy, to feel like the thing that we offer is cherished. These are all Venus qualities. We get very seduced by the ego and our desires, and we have all of our patterns and our triggers and again, we hear the words of someone in the present through the lens of the past and what it meant before and what we want for the future and all like that. I think that especially when Mercury goes through Taurus here from the May 9th until May 24th, that it's going to bring some levity and some humor and some intelligence and discrimination into any things that are also like, you know, where we feel stuck in the past, because we need to unstick ourselves from the past. And again, this powerful Saturn transit right now and for the next couple years is really showing us the repercussions of the past and the karma of the past, as we're seeing culturally and with the lockdowns and all that stuff. This is our karma from what we've been doing culturally and personally and all like that. And a new cycle of personal accountability and responsibility and all of that is upon us, I think. And so that's pretty much what I wanted to say about May 2020. And again, I want to make sure that people do know that you can get the Astrology Training Lab. I'll put it here below. It is, should have put the link in there before, sorry, traininglab.com. I meant to do that. And that you can get 14 days of forecasts, also full and new moon forecasts based on your sign, because all of these cycles, like this transit, the sun being in Aries now, that's totally different if you're Gemini like me, which is 11th house, than if you're Capricorn, where it's 4th house. Whole different cycle. It's a whole different cycle when we're going to have where all these planets are moving through Taurus, especially when the sun goes into Taurus. Now we're going to bring a big focal point there. Again, like I said, if you're Pisces, it's 3rd house. If you're Leo, it's 10th house. It's a big shift and it's a big difference. So these are all things that I hope you have benefited from before, and I hope that this was helpful for you to hear and that you have a great May 2020.